This is a fully 3D printed, rubber band powered, firing SPAS-12 replica. It has a working slide lock that re-engages after the slide is pumped, a working safety that stops the trigger from being pulled, a trigger that unlocks the slide lock after firing the gun, 6-round underbarrel magazine, and a folding stock. The cartridges are 3D printed, and the projectile is the outer skin, which is stripped off when firing. The two parts are held together by the elasticity of a split shaft, and therefore the depth of the cut is driven by the material choice. It's pretty easy to load and pretty accurate to shoot. In fact, this was the first take of the video I'm just showing now. I load one cartridge directly into the chamber and then 6 more into the magazine, going 2 at a time. Safety off, and here we go. Ejection works for both fired and unfired cartridges. Here we see it in slow motion. You can see how the slide lock is disengaged by the trigger pull and then re-engaged during the pump cycle. This of course means that in order to eject an unfired cartridge, the slide lock needs to be manually disengaged first. On a real SPAS-12, the slide lock also functions as what they call the quick safety and is on the other side of the trigger guard. But I switched it over here because it's easy to access with my trigger finger. Cartridges are loaded through the loading port on the bottom of the gun as per the real one. As we spin around, we see the lifter and the loading fin, with the loading fin holding the cartridges in the end of the magazine. We recolor for clarity and hide some components, and now see how the lifter is pushed aside during loading and then sprung back in place by the black elastic band. With the magazine now fully loaded, we can disengage the slide lock, allowing us to pump the foregrip, pushing the bolt all the way back, resetting the slide lock. Of course, this also loads a cartridge into the chamber, and so by disengaging the safety catch, we can then pull the trigger to fire. By watching the wobbler during the reload cycle, we see that the bolt pushes it backwards and then forwards again, and on the forward travel, it activates the lifter. The slide lock is disengaged by the trigger pull once again, and now from this perspective, we see the 2 loading fins being engaged and disengaged in sequence so that only one cartridge leaves the magazine. This view shows the motion of the cartridges that are in the magazine, and also the primer as it primes the hammer, pushing the charging door out of the way as it moves. When firing, the hammer release disengages the hammer, allowing it to fly down the barrel under tension, stripping the chambered cartridge as it goes. So far, it's not entirely clear why the primer has such a long stroke compared to the bolt, so by flipping everything over, we can see the handover mechanism. Here, the bolt starts its travel while locked to the primer, but it's then released and locked in its rearward position halfway through the primer's travel. One quick look at the latching mechanism of the slide lock as it's engaged by the trigger pull, and then we see one last reload cycle. As the magazine is now empty, we're simply priming the hammer for no reason. Therefore, by pulling the trigger as we slide the foregrip forward, we can safely deprime it. With the exception of the rubber bands, every component here is printed in PLA matte, PETG, or TPU. I printed it all on my X1C, with the full set of parts taking over 2 days, and with the exception of the stock, everything prints without support. However, not everything actually fitted in the build volume, so the heat shield and the foregrip are both printed in 2 parts and glued together using pieces of filament to align them. The heat shield also took little printed ribbon inserts to create the grill effect. Looking at the full bill of materials, and it's maybe a clue as to why I chose the SPAS-12 for this model, there's just too much stuff to fit in the model of any gun that doesn't have an enormous heat shield on the front. I mentioned that this model has a fair bit of firepower. Well, you can really see that when looking at the damage it did to the walls of my flat. I've got a bit of plastering work to do there, it seems. Similarly, there were a few breakages on the way, along with a few mishaps during filming, including occasions when I shot through the target, missed it completely, or failed to load the magazine correctly, resulting in a cartridge being ejected out of the loading port during a pump cycle. And that's pretty much it. The transition over from Lego to 3D printing has allowed me to put much more detail into this model, and has also made it quite a bit more solid than I'm used to. The Breakages site is now down, so all the info had to go into the video, which is why this is quite a bit longer than my older ones. On my channel, I have another video showing the full assembly and disassembly procedures. Let's finish up with some pictures, and thanks for watching.